Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, man. November is upon us. The water's cooling off. I feel like, in the month of November across the Midwest, Texas to Missouri, our water temperature is in the 60s. And it can get all the way into the 50s, just depending on what kind of fall we're gonna have, what all happens, what fronts come through. So, that water's cooling off, but that means those fish are biting. Biting, kind of exciting. It also means it's pecan season, so I'm gonna have some pecans right here. This is gonna be like a great giveaway that I'm gonna give you guys, along with some baits that I'm giving away. To win these baits, all you gotta do is just leave me a comment. Be sure you're a subscriber. We go through randomly in the December video, we pick a winner, and we'll mail these package of baits to you guys for being loyal subscribers, loyal followers of the channel. All right, with that said, let's break off. Let's get right into the pecan, or not the pecans. So let's get off into the baits. I got pecans on my head because I've been harvesting them every day and getting all that stuff done. But let's talk about fishing in November. And this is gonna be about the baits. Next week, we'll dive off where to throw those baits. So I've got some different baits here that I want you to think about. With that said, I don't want you to forget about the staples. November's still a time to throw a spinnerbait. November's still a time to throw your square bill or crankbait. November's still the time to throw your topwater like a Chopo. Just a phenomenal bait in November. Don't forget about those core baits. I feel like those are givens. I feel like you guys know that. I don't need to dive off into them. The idea behind this video is maybe get you thinking outside the box. And with that said, there's a big portion of fish that are deep. I feel like in all our lakes, we have fish that are shallow, we have fish that are deep, and they stay there year-round unless the spawn is happening. And then when the spawn happens, we have everything on the bank, thus why fishing is so great that time of the year. So I want to dive off into some baits out there for that deeper bite. And for that to work on your lake, it needs to be clear water. It needs to, you need to have bait fish out there in that 15 to 20 to 30 to 40 feet of water. If you're not seeing bait fish out in those depths, it's probably not gonna work on your lake. You have to have a lake conducive to it, Just off the top of my head, when I think of lakes that this works is obviously Table Rock, Rayburn, any of those deeper, clearer lakes that have clearer water that fish get offshore. Grand, the lower end of Grand would be one. Hartwell, the list goes on and on. Any of those lakes in eastern Tennessee, like I've never fished Percy Priest, but that would be a lake. The Tellico, Loudon, the Tennessee River lakes, those fish get out offshore. And, these are the baits that I want you to think about in those areas. And then I had to throw one other bait in there just because you have to think about this bait this time of year. All right, so bait number one in November that I want you to be thinking about, out there for that deeper bite, when you got that shad out in that deeper bite, is an underspin. I've got it rigged right here just with a Berkley Power Bait Minnow, a 4-inch version. This is a bait that I just throw out there around those balls of shad, let it go to the bottom, pick it up, let it go back to the bottom, or I may just let it pendulum back to the boat if I'm out over really deep water. We'll break off next week on where to throw this, where I'm gonna look for this bite on a given body of water, but this is a bait that I think you need to have tied on in November. Couple key things about it: the rod and the reel and the line. A slower gear ratio reel, lighter line, 10 and 12 pound test. And I like to throw it like on a 7-4 medium heavy, a 7-1 medium heavy rod. It's a single hook lure, but light line, slower gear ratio reel. And then we'll talk next week about where to throw this. But this would be a bait that I would have tied on in those clearer lakes when those fish are out deep feeding on those balls of shad. So underspin right there, bait number one. Bait number two for those deeper fish is a snap jig. This is a lot like, another popular bait this time of the year, going through the winter is an ice jig. The snap jig is a different version of it. And what happens is when you have this tied on and you jerk it up, these wings on the bottom tend to make that bait just flutter off, and then you jerk it up and then it just flutters off. And what happens is, you've got a bass sitting over here looking at it and you jerk it up and it just happens to swim right into his face and he has to eat it. It's a great reaction bait that has a very, very unique action. You throw it out there, let it go to the bottom, and you just pop it up and then that thing darts off. A couple things to keep in mind: don't get too heavy of a bait. Use the like a 3/8 or a 1/4 ounce head a lot of times. A 1/2 ounce head if you're really deep, but put some bigger plastic on it, because it's all about how that bait falls after you snap it. But it's just a Berkley Snap Jig, a very, very versatile bait. You can use it vertically, just right over the top of your boat, just like you would a drop shot. Just drop it down, hold it still, and like you got a fish there and he's not committing, just pop your rod a little bit and that bait pops up, and then it has a really cool fluttering action as it goes down, thus because of these wings right here. I rig it again with that 4-inch Berkley Minnow. Pearl white is the color I like. You got to think there's not a lot of light, with the depths that we're talking about, 20, 30 feet below the boat. But that is a bait that will work this time of year all through the winter, a Berkley Snap Jig, one that I don't know that you've thought about, that works in those clear water situations like you have across the country. So, all right, the rod and reel and line on that Snap Jig is just the same as it would be on that Underspin. It's 10 or 12 pound test. If you go with a bigger one, I guess you could go with 14 pound test, but most generally, if I had to choose one line size, it's going to be 12 pound test. A 7/4 rod, medium heavy is what I use. I like that longer rod just to help move a lot of line. If I'm using it over the side of the boat vertically, then I go with a shorter 7-foot medium heavy rod. But again, 10 to 12 pound test. This would be a bait that I would use a higher gear ratio reel, because I am moving this bait always with my rod. I'm never moving it with the reel. And what I mean by that, I'm throwing it out there and I pop it up off the bottom and then I let it fall, then I reel up to slack. So I'm using the reel just to reel up slack. That's the only time I'm moving the reel handle, is to take the slack up. Everything else is done with the rod. So I would use a higher gear ratio reel to be able to take up that slack really quick to be able to set the hook. It's not a bait that you throw out and you reel in like the Underspin is. This is a bait that you're moving with the rod, so that's why I'd use that higher gear ratio reel for that. So 12 pound test, a 7 to 7/4 medium heavy action rod, and a higher gear ratio reel, the Snap Jig. You guys like, comment, subscribe. I will be mailing this stuff to 3 lucky winners right there. All right, so last, completely 180 degrees, because I don't want to get away from the whole other bite that's happening in November. We've got a deep bite that's happening. I got you 2 baits there that I think will work. Obviously a drop shot would work, a jig and spoon would work, an ice jig would be some other baits to use for those deep fish, a swim bait, just a little power swimmer on like a 1/4 ounce head or 3/8 ounce head. But November, there's still a lot of fish shallow. We talked about those top waters. When I think of November, I think of crankbaits, 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 crankbaits. And we talk a lot about the shad and all those shad, but there's also, November is a time of the year that fish really start feeding on crawdads. So I've got the Berkley Digger, the 4-5 in a red. This is gonna be that bait that I'm gonna throw in those cloudy situations, those dark days, clear water, up shallow feeding. I'm gonna be burning it pretty quick. I'll still have it on a 6/8 to 1 gear ratio reel, but I'm gonna be moving it, like getting that reaction strike. This will be a bait I'll throw all the way. I'll be doing that when the water gets down to the plumb low 50s, but throwing it down rock transition banks. We'll get into where to throw it next week, but man, you've got to have crankbaits tied on in November where you're at. This would be one for those highland rocky reservoirs, those grassy reservoirs, when they really start keying on some crawdads, because it's going to happen in November. Crawdads are going to become a big part of their diet, and you can't go wrong with having a red crankbait. Also, but don't, a shad colored crankbait, that's going to be a bait too. So have that one in your mix. November is crankbait season. It just is for me. So I wanted to bring this to your attention, to have one tied on, to have it in your mind when you're out there, you're looking for those fish. I would throw this bait again on 12 pound fluorocarbon, a 7-foot medium heavy action rod, a 6/8 to 1 gear ratio reel, a 6 to 1, whatever you have in your arsenal, but reel it quick most of the time. And this thing right here, it's just a fish catching dude. It just really is in those clear water situations. All right, guys, there's, my top baits for November. By no means is this the only baits, but these are some baits I wanted you to think about, outside the box of the norms, everything else that we would think of, the Chapo, the square bill, the spinner bait, those vibrating jig, those baits that are just tried and true. I wanted to get outside the box a little bit, give you a couple other baits in your arsenal to think about to try on your given body of water. Also, I just want to remind you, man, I just got my pecans harvested. I'm really excited. Had a great crop this year. I will be giving away a package of these with each one of these, so you guys be sure you like, comment, and subscribe to win the baits and a bonus prize of having some pecans this month. If you guys want some of these, you can go to edwinweaverspecans.com. You know, my fresh pecans are as fresh as they get. I've been harvesting these. I think they're really good, you know, so you got to try some of my nuts. They're awesome. I got 3 different varieties. I got Lakota, Pawnee, and Kansas. They're going to go quick, guys. You know, we usually sell out, you know, by mid-December of the fresh pecans. We've got flavored pecans all year long. I'd be curious, what's your guys' favorite flavored pecans? Mine's jalapeno. I love jalapeno ones, and I love the cinnamon ones. And last but not least, I got some new merchandise. I got, my wife made up some new shirts. If you're interested, check them out. They're over on the edwinweavers.com website. Man, they might make a great gift for somebody in your family. But man, guys, I want to wish you all the luck this fall. Bass fishing, deer hunting, it's going on too. So I'm pretty excited about that. Gun season's just right around the corner here in Oklahoma. Can't wait to get Cade and I out there after a big buck. But don't forget, check in next week on the Where to Start Optimum Batteries video. And appreciate you guys following along. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm mailing these out to one of you guys. Have a great week.